I've got to come over and see the fake news. Let's go.
Some breaking news that we're following right now. Our senior justice correspondent Evan Perez is learning new information about the origins of the Russia probe and what there's somebody under investigation right now?
That's right. Well, this is an investigation that began and was found as part of the probe that's being done by Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General for the Justice Department. And what he found was that there was an employee at the FBI who altered a document that was used in the preparation for one of the FISA warrants, one of the warrants, surveillance warrants that was done against Carter Page, who was the Trump campaign aide. This document, whatever changes were made, was substantive enough to change the meaning of the document. We don't know a lot more about it. We don't know, for instance, whether without this change the FISA would have been approved or not, but it is a substantive change that was made to this document. And Michael Horowitz confronted this FBI employee during one of the interviews that was done as part of this review, and that person admitted to making that change. So now this is part of a criminal investigation that's being done by John Durham, who is the prosecutor in Connecticut, who was appointed by Bill Barr, the Attorney General, to do a wide-ranging review of everything that was used, all the intelligence that was gathered to begin what became the Mueller investigation. So again, this is an altered document. There's a lot we don't know about this employee and what the motivations were, but it is a big deal, obviously, for you to make a change to a document, to alter it in any way, and that's why.
So FBI agents under investigation. Clearly, this is going to reverberate and provide ammunition to the president and his allies that this whole Russia investigation was criminally wrong.
Exactly. I mean, look, this is exactly what people close to the president have been saying, that the FBI committed wrongdoing in starting this investigation. And so the question now, obviously, is what other details are going to be part of the Horowitz report that's going to be released on December 9th, and how much political hay the president's allies are going to make about it.
Let me bring Clearly, this is going to reverberate and provide ammunition to the president and his allies that this whole Russia investigation was criminally wrong.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Democrats have been talking about impeachment since the very day that Trump was inaugurated, but until recently, no one here in Washington took that idea very seriously. Maxine Waters would rant about a trial. Then Pilates moms in Santa Monica would fantasize on Twitter about removing Trump by force. But the adults in the party, Nancy Pelosi, for example, the speaker, opposed impeachment on the grounds that it was bad politics. It might boomerang on them. And then, in what seemed like a day, everything changed completely. Suddenly we had impeachment hearings playing out live on TV. Nobody explained why. Looking back, what exactly happened? Well, part of the answer is that Democrats were simply responding to their own cheerleaders on cable news.
If precedent means anything in the Trump era, Donald Trump must be impeached.
But if they don't impeach, Democrats will advocate a clear constitutional chance to hold this president fully accountable.
A national nightmare is upon us. The basic rules of our democracy are under attack from the president. We begin tonight with a series of admissions by the president that all but assures his impeachment in the House of Representatives.
I don't understand why the fact that impeachment is polarizing is it makes them just as cowardly as the Republicans.
Absolutely, and to my mind, it also is an abdication of their constitutional responsibility.
Will there be any consequences for this president who is continuing to defy the rule of law?
The rule of law. Hear that, Mr. and Mrs. America? It's a national emergency, and if they don't impeach, Democrats, listen carefully, Democrats, will abdicate their solemn constitutional responsibility. Democrats literally have no choice but to undo the 2016 election. That's what the hair hats on TV, the men who wear makeup and yell at their assistants, were telling Democratic leaders night after night after night. And remarkably, and it is remarkable looking back, Democrats believed the document. So what happened next? Well, let's see. Have you read the new Vanity Fair? Sorry, rhetorical question. Nobody reads Vanity Fair anymore. It likely won't exist by this time next year. But before the title disappears forever, check out this month's issue. There's a fascinating piece by Ken Stern that assesses new polling on impeachment. Here's the headline. Among independents, the only group that matters in an election, support for impeachment, impeaching Trump, has dropped by 10 points since the process started. How to explain this? In political terms, this is the Andrea Doria, a routine cruise that suddenly becomes a disaster, a debacle. They spent 2 weeks telling you that Donald Trump is a criminal. And by the end, more people sympathized with Donald Trump. How'd that happen? Take a close look at the numbers, and it's obvious how it happened. Independent voters were asked to rank 11 issues in order of their importance. First on the list was fiscal health. 74% of independent voters said that the budget deficit was their main concern. 72% said health care was the main concern. 70% said infrastructure, pretty conventional. Impeachment? That came in dead last, 11 out of 11. Only 37% of independents thought it was a priority at all. By a margin of 3 to 1, and this is hilarious, independents said that impeachment was more important to politicians and the media than it was to them. These are not subtle numbers. So how did Democrats miss them? Well, because they only talk to each other. This is what happens when you let Jeff Zucker run your political party. You start to imagine that CNN's primetime lineup somehow speaks for America rather than for a tiny, out-of-touch little part of it. Zucker tells you that impeachment is the only issue that matters. His eunuch agrees with him, and you believe them. Come fall, you lose the election. In a moment like this, weirdly, it's the non-politicians who seem to see things the most clearly. Here's Andrew Yang after last week's presidential debate.
But when I talk to voters around the country, Wolf, I have to say I get very, very few questions about impeachment. I know that there are people who are very intent on the impeachment proceedings day to day, but that doesn't line up with what I'm hearing from voters here on the ground.
So would Democrats, you believe, be better off simply wrapping up this impeachment process sooner rather than later?
I do think that the more time that goes on, the less time the Democrats have to present a positive vision for the country that will get people excited and help us win in 2020.
Out in Santa Monica, the Pilates moms are looking at that and saying, Andrew Yang, did he just criticize impeachment? Is he a right-winger? Is he a racist? Is he telling us that voters want politicians to care more about their lives than they want politicians to extract symbolic televised revenge on their political enemies? If you watch MSNBC, it's hard to believe that could be true. But that's what the Yang guy is claiming. In the wake of those poll numbers we just read, other Democrats appear to be considering the same thing. Even Adam Schiff may be coming around. Watch this.
Do you think President Trump should be impeached? I want to discuss this with my constituents and my colleagues before I make a final judgment on it.
And you've also said that what you've seen is, quote, far more serious than what Nixon did. Explain to me how you have not come to the conclusion that the president should be impeached. I mean, it sounds like you think he should be impeached.
Well, I certainly think that the evidence that's been produced overwhelmingly shows serious misconduct by the president. But I do want to hear more from my constituents, and I want to hear more from my colleagues. This is not a decision I will be making alone.
Yeah, he's not going to make the decision alone. Just to make sure you got this clear, the man in charge of impeachment in the House, the member you just watched for 2 full weeks shepherding the impeachment hearings, the guy who cried on television just thinking about how much Donald Trump needed to be impeached right now, that guy isn't really sure he's for impeachment. You know, he needs to talk to his colleagues. He needs to hear more from his constituents. It's a lot to think about. He's going to prayerfully consider it over the holiday weekend, just alone, just in some reflection. That's Adam Schiff's position now. In other words, it's over. Democrats lost.
And provide ammunition to the president and his allies that this whole Russia investigation was criminally wrong.
Monologue, we start with a closer look at the mainstream media mob, and they are a mob, and their allies in the Democratic Party. Because over the past week, we have witnessed more of the same. Madness now consumes pretty much 99% of media in this country. Now, to be a Democrat or part of the mob, there's no objective truth in your rage Trump every second of every day world. You have to be a member, you have to have zero intellectual honesty, selective moral outrage only, no common sense, no reason, and breathtaking hypocrisy. Now, the mob's nonstop coverage of the congenital liar, Schiff, and his impeachment charade, it wasn't just maddening. It was also full of lies and outright propaganda, misinformation. They spent an entire week digging for evidence that doesn't just exist and predictably, breathlessly, hyping up testimony filled with, let's see, conflicting, confusing statements, almost all of it on hearsay, conjecture, and what are people's opinions about a transcript. We don't need their interpretation because we actually get to read it ourselves and decide for ourselves. None of it would be admissible or ever count in evidence in a real court of law. Here is a small sample of how sick, ugly, twisted, and despicable they really are. Take a look.
Trump allegedly abused his power for private gain by pressuring Ukraine. Abuse of office for Trump's personal gain at the expense of us.
He used the security and the international relationships that we are required to have for the security of our country as a bargaining chip for his own personal gain.
President Trump extorts a partner who's under duress for his personal political benefit.
We're talking about here is a bribery extortion scheme. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, extortion is extortion and bribery is bribery.
Talking about Joe. Oh, now somehow at the very same time, these very same people, follow me here, they have literally bifurcated, cut in half their brain. They have to literally shut off one half of their brain and downplay video evidence of the real corruption that they're acting so outraged about, that in this case has incontrovertible, overwhelming evidence. In other words, there really was a quid pro quo, but it was with Joe 30330, shaking down the country of Ukraine and bragging about it. Now, you're not getting $1 billion unless you fire the prosecutor who's investigating my zero experience son. Wow. You're not getting the $1 billion unless you fire that guy because you're investigating him, there's no experience, and he's making millions and millions of dollars. Now, stop for a second. How can the same people all last week in the mob and the media, how can the same people in the news industry, they're journalists, be so outraged at President Trump for doing nothing? Zip. Yet totally, completely ignored the biggest slam dunk case of what they say that they are so outraged about. You have to ignore the indisputable fact that Hunter Biden, he was making millions and millions of dollars serving on the board of a corrupt Ukrainian oil and gas company. You have to ignore the fact that Hunter had zero experience in oil, gas, energy, or Ukraine. You'd have to ignore the fact that Hunter Biden was hired just weeks after his father was appointed to lead White House policy in Ukraine. You have to ignore the fact that Vice President Joe Biden leveraged $1 billion tax dollars, and bragging about it, to force out a Ukrainian prosecutor, the same one investigating his son. That is all. None of that is in dispute. But the mob and the media said this is one big, this is only a conspiracy theory. Nobody has ever really proven it. Nobody's investigated it. We are, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. Take a look.
Mr. Vice President, President Trump has falsely accused your son of doing something wrong while serving on a company board in Ukraine. I want to point out there's no evidence of wrongdoing by either one of you.
There's no proof whatsoever that Joe Biden did anything wrong or that Hunter Biden did anything wrong.
Trump's claims about wrongdoing here are unsubstantiated. We have looked. Lots of outlets have looked.
Trump is making a wholly unsubstantiated claim when he alleges corruption by the Bidens. There is no evidence of any wrongdoing. In reality, Joe Biden was the one working to purge corruption from Ukraine.
An utterly baseless theory.
Vis-a-vis Joe Biden. There's no evidence, nor has there ever been any evidence, that he was doing anything but trying to get the Ukraine government to crack down on corruption.
Leave Joe alone. Just leave him alone.
Concerned about the backsliding on the part of Kyiv in terms of corruption. They made, I'll give you one concrete example. But it just happened to be that was the assignment I got. I got all the good ones, so I got Ukraine, and I remember going over convincing our team or others to convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out the press conference. I said, no, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, what, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time. Well, there's still, so they made some genuine, substantial changes institutionally and with people. But in one of the three institutions, there's now some backsliding.
The Burisma, the Biden probe, it's a bunch of BS.
Now that's how despicable and corrupt the Democrats and the mob are. How is it no evidence? We've all looked. If you looked and you'll hear Joe bragging, you're not getting the $1 billion. He's leveraging the money. And if you look closer, watch Hunter Biden on GMA. What did he do? He said, no, I have no experience. Well, I once was on a board at Amtrak. Oh, there's a ton of experience. This level of groupthink is not only despicable, what you just watched is dangerous. They're losing it. Now, I say mob in the media for a reason. They are a mob with a mob mentality and a mob mindset. They don't care about their breathtaking hypocrisy, obviously. Their hatred of Trump, well, that is superior to everything else. They don't care about the lies that they're telling, the propaganda they're spreading, the conspiracy theories they're spinning, the hoaxes that they continue to perpetrate, one right after another, after another, after another. Because they're in their little bubble, little echo chamber. There's a whole rest of the country that doesn't live in D.C., New York, L.A., and San Francisco. And their bubble is filled with every second, minute, hour of every 24-hour day. Trump rage, psychosis, venom. And that has resulted in this endless stream of fake hysteria, lying, propaganda, misinformation, smearing, slander, distortion, and everything in between. They have been crying wolf for 3 long years. And by the way, they've not done a thing for you. We, the American people, not one thing have these people done, except bring us to the brink of impeachment. Wow. Take a look.
I have not seen anything like this since October 20th, 1973, when President Nixon fired Archibald Cox.
Richard Nixon. Watergate. Echoes of Watergate. A giant step toward impeachment. Impeachment.
Impeachment.
Impeachment.
Impeachment. Impeachment implications are now in the air.
The president will be removed from office.
Bombshell.
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 Bombshell. Bombshell. Bombshell.
Bombshell. Bombshell stories dropping seemingly every day.
He will resign the presidency.
It's warming to the idea of his resignation. He should resign.
Resign. The president sees the walls closing in and is lashing out.
He feels the walls closing in.
Closing in.
You could feel the thread being pulled. You can feel the clothes starting to come off the emperor. I believe this is the beginning of the end.
Donald Trump's done. He's done. There's no question about that.
These people are sick. Selective moral outrage, and that's what the mob looks like. Sad, it's sick, it's dangerous. When the facts don't fit their narrative, they just lie. They lied for 3 years about Trump, Russia, the collusion hoax. They lied about the allegations against Justice Kavanaugh. Anyone ever say they're sorry? They lied about Covington High School students like, oh, Nicholas Sandmann. By the way, Nicholas Sandmann, I predict, is going to be one of the wealthiest kids in the country pretty soon. They lied about Ukraine. They're lying about the Biden. Every single day they lie when they say that they're journalists. They're not journalists. And yet they have the gall, oh, they always want to criticize us. Look at fake news CNN. Look at all their phony reporting. They're actually using, well, this guy wouldn't have a job. He's so bad at TV. This low-rated stenographer of Jeff Zucker, their president. His name is Humpty Dumpty. That's what I call him. He dedicated an entire segment. He doesn't have, I don't think, 1 million viewers on his show, to a sparsely watched Sunday show critiquing our coverage of Schiff's impeachment charade, calling the Ukrainian interference in the 2016 election a conspiracy theory. It's the problem, the Ukrainian court determined otherwise, and maybe you'd want to go and look at what Politico said on January 11, 2017, and read about Alexander Chalupa, the Ukrainian embassy in Washington, and how successful they were at interfering, helping Hillary, and trying to hurt Donald Trump. But then minutes later, then they feature a guest suggesting that President Trump is a destructive cult leader using mind control on his supporters. And Humpty is just one of many of the monitors taking order from their leader, their fearless leader, fake news chief Jeff Zucker. Their whole purpose of this low-rated, last-place existent so-called news network channel is to attack the channels that are successful. And if it wasn't so sick, it's actually pretty funny. It's very entertaining to me. In order to deflect from their own constant lying and their own conspiracies and their own hoaxes, well, and of course their anti-Trump bias every second of the day, they just lie. And more, they claim others are guilty of what they do every day, all day.
We choose truth over facts.
So we've got a real crisis of information in the country. Make no mistake, fake news CNN, Area 51, yes, Roswell Rachel Maddow's conspiracy television network, MSDNC, and whole channel that tries to duplicate what she does. They have zero fidelity to truth. Zero fidelity to truth and nothing but the truth, to the rule of law, equal justice under the law, equal application of the laws, equal application of standards, Joe and Hunter. That's why it is up to us, I guess. Fine, they'll leave it to us. The #1 show on cable news, thanks to all of you. We will remind them that Ukrainian interference in the 2016 elections actually happened. That's why we will vet quid pro quo Joe and Hunter and the rest of the radical extreme socialist democratic field. They'll never do it. That's why it'll be up to us to call out, yes, the compromised, the corrupt, congenital liar Schiff and the Schiff show for what it really is. Just another effort to smear President Trump, undo a duly elected president. And by the way, we'll kick it all off with either hearsay or opinion witnesses and a hearsay non-whistleblower who was communicating apparently with Schiff's office early on. Look at this report. January 2017, Washington Times. This individual might have actually benefited from one of President Obama's final directives. Wow. Doing to the next president that which you didn't want in your administration, giving whistleblowers new protections against the executive branch. This came in the final weeks of the Obama presidency, and as a Washington Times columnist put it, quote, this is in stark contrast to when he entered office in 2009, and Obama waged a war against this community, and his administration prosecuted 9 whistleblowers under the 1917 Espionage Act, more than double that of all other previous administrations combined. But the mob, well, President Trump is bad, and, well, Obama's a saint.
Shut up and stop asking questions, says the reporter.
These people are sick. Again, it's crystal clear. They have an agenda, zero fidelity to truth, and unwavering allegiance to their own far extreme left-wing socialist agenda. Here now is a congressman vowing to take the Daily Beast and fake news CNN to court. House Intel Committee Ranking Member Devin Nunes. I got to be honest, I know more about this than maybe you want me to reveal, so I will let you say it in your own words. I saw the report about you. I happen to know a lot of it is outright lies. Now, what are you planning to do?
Well, Sean, like we've seen so many times over the last 3 years, every time House Republicans on the Intelligence Committee come up with real information and put it out there, what do? They smear the messenger. And the problem that CNN has this time and the Daily Beast is, look, I understand the last week and a half, it was a disaster for them. It was a train wreck for them. So what did they have to do? They had to come out and say, well, look, Devin Nunes was actually the one that was meeting with all of these Ukrainians. So sorry, CNN, it's totally false. So we put out a very clear statement after the story came out on Friday night. saying it's demonstrably false, total fake news. And I will tell you, Sean, for all of the last 3 years, including the Russia hoax to the Ukraine hoax, this is the mother of all fake news stories. There is not one bigger than this. And so next week, we are going to take them to court. They will have an opportunity to come to court so that we can subpoena each other, we can get discovery, we can set people down for depositions. And I have a bet for you, Sean. CNN and the Daily Beast are going to run for cover. They're going to fight this. They're not going to show up in court. They're not going to accept service. So look, but at the end of the day, I'm going to track them down, and I'm going to hold them accountable, because this has just gone on for too long, and this is the only way we're going to be able to get retribution and be able to seek fairness and transparency in the media is by holding them accountable.
I applaud what you're doing. I really do. And actually, I'm pretty close to doing the same thing in some ways myself, which I won't talk about tonight. But as a public figure, our standard is high. Absence of malice. Look at Nicholas Sandmann. I would say the odds that this kid is going to be worth hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars is pretty high, because they lied about that kid. Even when the facts came out, they kept lying. And I would suspect that they're going to want to settle and have non-disclosure agreements at the end of it. It's harder, but it's important. I think we're getting to a point that they've got to be held accountable. How spectacular is the lie on, say, a scale 1 to 100 of the lies that they told about you?
Well, your scale of 1 to 100 would not be, they would blow the scale apart, because it would be 1,000. So, look, I don't know how to describe it better. I made a clear statement on Friday night. Demonstrably false and scandalous fake news. Look, there were 5 other agencies, media agencies, that had this same fake news story that decided not to run it. 2 months before. We have others that had the same story. So, look, I think it's also a little bit fake news, Sean, that these media companies have been, they tell a story so often it just becomes true that, oh, you're a public figure. Well, we're a public figure, but really, if you have reckless disregard for the truth and actual malice, and I mean, are you kidding me? Have you been watching CNN or reading the Daily Beast for the last 3 years? I mean, if they have malice towards anyone, I mean, obviously the president they have the most malice for, but clearly they have malice towards myself and the House Republicans.
Oh yeah, they don't like you. They don't like me either. I have lawyer recommendations. I consider Lynn Wood. He represents Nicholas Sandmann, Charles Harder. Remember, he won in the Gawker case. I'd like to see these guys get a lot of work, and I think they might. Congressman, thank you for sharing. We're going to watch very closely what happens with this suit. All right, December 9th, we know the FISA abuse report will be released by the Inspector General Horowitz. An obvious effort to get ahead of the story. Now we're seeing anonymous sources playing down the report, the New York Times, Washington Post. Evidence is clear, multiple warnings. We know were given to the DOJ and the FBI, multiple warnings. Hillary paid for this dirty dossier. It's not verified and not verifiable, we find out. And if the report does not find what is obvious, what we already know, premeditated fraud against the FISA court, I'd say we're screwed as a country for a lot of reasons. Joining us now, Fox News contributor Sarah Carter and Carter Page. Let me turn to you, Carter Page, because your name, you lost your constitutional rights. You have told me you served your country. Every time you went abroad, did you or did you not come back and talk to our intelligence people and give them everything they wanted? And did they not at times actually ask you to do things for them?
I've served my country for over a quarter century, Sean, and I've always done the best I could, and when I was asked to help my country, I always did.
But after a year of surveilling you, you're not under arrest. Obviously, they found nothing. Do you think you were used to get to Trump?
No question. It's on the face of it, it's absolutely clear. And you were talking with Congressman Nunes about knowledge of falsity and reckless disregard for the truth. I mean, that's exactly what the DNC did with their fake dossier and this entire fraud, which then colluding with the FBI and DOJ. So it's totally out of control.
Okay, so what is your next step?
I'm planning a very serious battle plan. And actually, with regard to this IG report, we're going to have a lot of fights.
We're at the point in the process where people mention that and are apparently being told what's said. That's where some of these leaks are coming from. Have you been given that opportunity?
Absolutely no opportunity whatsoever. And I'm thinking about ways of fighting back, potentially even a court injunction. And we'll see what happens.
Don't tell me you're going to delay it.
I'm not going to delay it.
If you delay
I'm not going to delay it. I promise. But I'm also talking with Senate Judiciary. I haven't gotten a full final answer on that. I think it's been totally one-sided across the board. I would like to also, at that 11 December hearing, have a say.
You were smeared, slandered, used by people for the purpose of getting at Donald Trump?
That's who they were really looking to get. So
otherwise, you'd probably be in jail after a year of surveillance, right?
And really, there's tons of perjury traps. I mean, that's what they grilled me on. So
go to you, Sarah Carter. All right, we know it's premeditated fraud. We know under an interrogatory, Steele, I don't have any idea if it's true. The FBI later said 90% of it's proven false. But they used it anyway, and they were warned repeatedly. How could they ever come out with anything less than premeditated fraud committed on a court to spy on him and take away his rights, and to spy on a president, a transition team, and a candidate?
Well, remember, Sean, Inspector General Michael Horowitz is basically going to lay out the facts. The facts is he's collected them. He doesn't have the same kind of purview that John Durham will have, especially in a criminal probe where he can subpoena witnesses, impanel a grand jury, look into the issues that we've been reporting on. For example, John Durham has now expanded his probe into the Pentagon, into the Office of Net Assessment, which paid FBI informant, we believe, Stefan Halper, for his work. He was the same person, as Carter Page has told you many times before, that befriended him. We also know now in the Horowitz report, based on sources that I've been speaking to, both on the record and off the record or on background, who have said that Horowitz's report is so significant because of Kevin Kleinsmith. This is the FBI lawyer that worked directly under General Counsel James Baker. And if he altered documents...
Are they going to use him as a scapegoat so Comey, who signed the thing and verified it as true, can get off scot-free?
No, I don't think so, because this is what they're concerned about now, and I've been talking to sources that a number of people within the Bureau, particularly within the FBI, that were involved in actually approving those FISA warrants on Carter Page are really worried right now. They're worried about the fact that those documents were altered and that those 3 renewals were altered. So we're going to find out on December 9th for sure.
All right, thank you, Sarah Carter. Carter Page.
The Burisma, the Biden probe, it's a bunch of BS.
Clearly, this is going to reverberate and provide ammunition to the president and his allies that this whole Russia investigation was criminally wrong.